Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Parent Cafe, hosted by New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center, NYPCC. My name is Alyssa, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's session, Meaningful Conversations, Strengthening Your Connection with Adolescent Boys. Before I begin, I want to remind everyone that Spanish translation is available for today's presentation. También tenemos traducción en español disponible para la presentación de hoy. Si desea escucharla en español, por favor haga clic en el icono de interpretación que aparece en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccione español. Será dirigido a una sala separada donde podría disfrutar de la presentación completa en español. Okay, so before we get started, I would love to share a short video with all of you about who we are at NYPCC and the work we do to support children, families, and communities across New York City.
I think anything is possible when it comes to supporting our community members, especially for those who are looking for help and looking to change their life for the better. That drives and motivates my passion to help others.
Buscar ayuda es lo más sano. El Centro de Psicoterapia de Nueva York me ha ayudado mucho a mí, a mi familia, a mis hijas a salir adelante.
NYPCC was founded in 1974 to meet the mental health needs of the community. And we're helping people who would not be able to get the services if NYPCC were not in their neighborhoods. And now, almost 50 years later, our agency is the largest outpatient provider of mental health services in New York State.
Nos ha enseñado muchas cosas como familia, como hijos. De 2 años para acá que hemos estado con NYPCC, yo he visto el cambio de ellas y me siento orgullosa porque cuando trabajamos en equipo en casa es algo totalmente diferente que yo a veces las quedo viendo y yo digo, wow.
We want to go into our communities. We want to do workshops. We want to do trainings. We want to raise awareness around mental health.
Cuando hay algo, un desorden en la familia, yo pensé que esa era mi responsabilidad y me sentía como sola. Cuando tú escuchas a otras personas hablar de que si hay solución, entonces quieres dar el brinco, quieres saltar y decir, tengo que estar allá.
It means the world to me to help this community because I am from the community. We know the people that we serve because we are the people who we serve.
La verdad me siento muy orgullosa de tener en el área que yo vivo un centro así.
We're unique, I think, because of our staff, because of the passion our staff have.
I'm actually NYPCC's Bronx office first intern. They hired me full-time when I graduated, and I've just been here ever since. One of the biggest things that NYPCC has really helped me in my career is to give me the confidence. We also have great company culture, great company benefits and programs, and also events. Working on something that you like, helping people, and also like you enjoy the company, like I think that's a win-win-win, right?
Currently, there's a mental health crisis in the entire country, but the neighborhoods that we're in have been impacted even more severely.
When we're in the community, connecting with community members, we always get like, oh my God, you guys are angels. You guys come to help us. And that's how it truly feels. The vision I see is to help those who are in a true dark space see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I would love for us as an agency to continue to be that beacon of light and to continue to shine for our community members.
Yes, thank you so much for enjoying that video. We are very proud of the work our team does every day, and I really hope that give you all a quick glimpse into what drives our mission, providing accessible, compassionate, and culturally responsive mental health care for everyone. So, before we get started, let's take a moment to go over our community agreements, which help us create a welcoming and respectful space for everyone joining today. This meeting will be recorded for sharing purposes via our YouTube channel. Please stay muted throughout the duration of this presentation. The chat box will be closed for now and will reopen during our Q&A segment after our icebreaker, where you'll have the chance to share your questions. Spanish interpretation is available. Apriete el botón global para escuchar el presentación en español. And lastly, to schedule an appointment or connect with NYPCC, you can visit us at nypcc.org/referral. And now, I'm very happy to introduce our presenter for today, Scott Bloom, who serves as the Director of Special Projects here at NYPCC. He's been able to create and implement trainings for clinical therapists, community partners, and parents. He's part of our community outreach, working closely with CBOs and our academy, where he provides training for new therapists and supervisors, group supervision, and consults on projects throughout the agency. We're so grateful to have him leading today's discussion. Welcome, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you very much. Let me share my screen. We can start right away. Oh, okay. Let's see, slideshow. Okay, very good. So thank you so much, Alyssa, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I know it's a very important topic. So glad you have the opportunity to be with us this afternoon to learn some strategies, some guidance, and ways to connect to your teen boys and enable you to have more confidence. I'd really like you to walk away today with a couple of good strategies and takeaways to have those tough conversations with any teen, but especially with teen boys. So let's get started. I want to let you know that this workshop is going to highlight what boys can teach us about the cultural and social impact on their mental health, which is suggested by high rates of isolation, anxiety, depression, loneliness, suicide ideation, and even violence. We're going to, again, give you some key strategies for youth while promoting their resilience, and so that their mental health outlook is going to be in a positive, forward-leaning mode here. Just to note that this topic changes rapidly. We get new information and new research almost daily, and so we're going to just stick to a couple of key issues here today as we move on. So let's get started here. First, I want to do a little icebreaker. And what that means is we're going to keep the chat box open. And I'd like you to tell me in the chat, and you can just put a few words or a sentence or two, what's the most challenging aspect about raising teen boys? So why don't you go ahead and put that in the chat? What's the most challenging aspect about raising teen boys? One or two words, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. Just going to read as many as I can in a moment here. I'm sure there are a lot of challenges that folks are dealing with. Having a conversation about how they're feeling, keeping communication open, attitude, yes. Addiction to technology, we're going to touch upon that. Emotional stability, peer pressure, sexuality, right? They think they're grown men. Yes. Teenagers think they know everything. That's right. Controlling anger, listening, tech addiction, the ability to express their feelings. I think we see that over and over again. That's great. So I'm gonna ask you to stop for a moment. Uncertain about their future. Yeah, this is coming. So for those of you who didn't get a chance, or if you'd like to add, let's add this one to it. What's the most challenging aspect about conversing with teen boys? What do you feel is the most challenging aspect about that? Just having a conversation. I think some of you already said it, but honesty from their part, yeah, everything. I get that. Shutting down. They don't have the language. They're not interested. They're guarded. They never want to talk. How to speak their language, right? Trying to not make them feel defenses, competition, not always willing to share, shutting their feelings, believing what you're saying, right? That you have some credibility. You've been there, right? And trust issues. I think that's a perfect way to, we're going to shut the chat for now. Thank you so much. We'll open it up later. We're gonna shut that right now. And let's see here. Okay, good. So we're going to touch on a lot of those. I think you're already in touch with some of those issues. So I'm glad you came here today so you can get again more understanding of why this is happening here. As you can see from the headlines, the problem with boys and men has been a hot topic in the news before the pandemic, during the last election, and continues today. But what do we mean by problem? If we kind of go to a time machine 50 years ago, 125 years ago, at the turn of the 20th century, America also had a boy problem. There was truancy, there was crime in the streets, a lot of making trouble going on. Because the United States was going through a major transition. We had new technology, we had radio, electricity, we had major transportation, the beginning of highways. We also had a huge influx of immigration and also a growing socioeconomic inequality. Sounds familiar, right? Some of those issues are still going on. But what happened back then, the culture at large actually created organizations and institutions to help service those youth and prevent troubles for expanding, so to speak. So we see the beginning of big brothers, big sisters, girls club, boys club. We see Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, 4-H clubs. So the society came together to support youth. And right now, we seem to be in a struggle of finding what are the right answers here today. So if we were to flip the calendar to 125 years, we have now what many research are calling a crisis of connection. As men and boys are increasingly detached from civic life, family life, social life, a lot of youth talk about being lost right now. We see in a study they did back in 1990, 55% of men said that they had 1 to 6 close male friends. They did a similar study last year in 2024 and found that only 26% of men had 1 to 6 close friends. That's cut in half. So it is a crisis of connection that we see here. So let's talk a little bit about it. I want to start with men because, of course, boys are growing into men. So let's take a look at the state of men's mental health. 6 million men are affected by depression every year in the United States. Only 1 in 4 of those men report speaking to a mental health professional. We also know from the CDC more than 48,000 people died by suicide in 2021. The suicide rate for men was almost 4 times higher than it was for women back in 2021. And the suicide rates are not going down. And if you look at this last iconograph on the left here, on the bottom, 40% of men polled said it would take thoughts of suicide or self-harm to compel them to seek professional help. That's a little bit devastating. In other words, what they're saying is a man has to get to the point of suicidal thoughts in order at that point to seek help rather than doing it, preventively. So why are suicide so high amongst men? I think this is important because it links to boys and particularly young men and youth, right? First of all, I want to make sure you all know that suicide is a very complex and it can be a very sensitive issue. There are a lot of factors, multiple factors that push someone towards suicide and drastic action like that. So I don't want to generalize. However, when we cut through some of that data, traditionally men have been less likely to seek support for mental health issues. And let's look at some of those reasons. First one is their role in society, in their identity, right? For generations, young boys are told to man up, right? They're encouraged to be tough. And any admittance that you're not okay is actually looked on as a sign of weakness. While women are often wrongly characterized as emotional, Men are not encouraged to speak up at all, and this has its roots in childhood when boys are told not to cry. It's interesting, as I was doing research for this, there's kind of a flip side to this. There is one emotion that tends to be allowed and accepted throughout our culture, and that's anger. And in therapy, we certainly want to highlight the need for men to recognize their emotions rather than to suppress them. And one of the ways is communication. Generally speaking, women tend to be more communicative around their feelings, around their mental health, their well-being, rather than internalizing their emotion. And this is supported by a lot of research. Finally, stigma is a major barrier for men seeking help or to discuss and talk about their feelings, right? In a recent survey, about 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health, and they cite the following. Number one reason, I've learned to deal with it. Number two, I don't want to be a burden to anyone. Number three, I'm too embarrassed. And number four, the negative stigma that goes along with it. So these are mostly the reasons why men and young men don't want to talk about or deal with their mental health. So how does this all translate to young boys? So let's move into that. Here are some quick stats about mental health in general for our youth. As I said, we are living in a global health crisis right now, but mental health has been worsening for young people before COVID. Among boys ages 3 to 17, 28% have a mental, emotional, or behavioral developmental problem. Want to read this last one here on the left again. 40% of teen boys say they sometimes or often feel lonely. Research suggests that socialization practices that teach boys at an early age to be self-reliant, to be strong, to minimize their emotions and do everything on their own result in adult men who are less willing to seek mental health services. We know that some boys are more affected than others, and the outcome for boys of color are worse, particularly growing up in poverty, which disproportionately hurts boys in a number of different ways. As parents or caregivers, we need to be aware of that intersectionality, as we call it, recognizing that there are different aspects of a person's identity. It's not just I'm a male, but also what's my race? Again, gender, class, sexuality, all of these things get impacted by our families, by our communities, and again, by the culture at large. And it can be experienced as a privilege, or it can be experienced as discrimination. And it's about understanding how these overlapping identities shape an individual's experience, right? There's no cookie cutter approach to human beings. I know that many of you out here work in community-based agencies. You might be teachers, you might be caregivers. So we have more than parents out there, and you work with youth. So I'm so glad that you joined us here today so that you can get a sense of when you are speaking or working with young boys, what might be underneath, right? What might be going on there? Dr. Michael Lindsay, who is the Dean of Social Work at NYU and a long-time colleague of mine, I'm glad to say, he says some of the major differences with students of color is that stigma concerns are paramount when one needs help, when one seeks mental health services. The worst thing you can say about yourself is that you need help to someone. And this, again, disproportionately happens with young boys of color. There's also a distrust of mental health professionals. And as a therapist, we know we have to work on that and offer what we call a safe space for youth to talk about some of these issues. So how do we get from here to here? In other words, it's okay to show affection. It's okay to be yourself. It's okay to be hurt, right? In Ruth Whitman's new book, Boy Mom, and I'm going to go into some of these books in a little bit, she describes in her research how new generation of young boys to men are becoming more isolated. They're resentful. They don't feel like they know their place in their world, and they're dropping out of school. And some say they're sort of dropping out of life right now. Her studies show the more closely men and boys conform to traditional masculine norms, the more likely they'd be depressed, suicidal, perform poorly in school, and engage in risky behaviors, and the less likely they're going to seek out mental health services or physical care. So, this cultural dynamic means for you as parents and caregivers that they're going to be less likely to open up to you, to teachers, to friends, to mental health professionals such as ourselves, right? Partly is because they don't have the language. They don't have that vocabulary to recognize and discuss what's going on with them and ultimately seek life-saving, mental health services. So how is stigma related? There are two types of stigma I want to focus on, and it's, I think, important for you to recognize. One is that social stigma. This refers to the negative attitudes towards and disapproval of a person or a group experiencing mental health illness, and it's based on having a weak character. So that's the public perception. Then there's that, what I call that internalized perception. It's the self-stigma. The person with the mental health illness feels shame about his or her symptoms. I have not lived up to it. I'm comparing myself to other boys. Oh, they're great in sports. I'm not. Oh, they made the school play. I'm not. Oh, they get all A's. I don't. There's this sense of competition that boys are trained to be part of rather than a parent or someone saying, hey, it's okay you lost. It's okay you failed. We'll work on that. We'll help you, rather than what's the matter with you? And so many young boys now, particularly with the messages they get from social media, they're comparing themselves to unrealistic expectations here. Research shows that it's not masculinity itself that makes men violent. If we think about violence or tenderness, but it's a sense of shame that they're not masculine enough. Again, this idea that the belief that they fall short of some kind of standard. And as parents, we set the standard. We have to let them know what that standard is. And in most cases, we want them to be safe. We want them to build character. We want them to be a decent human being. So we have to, like a lot of things in our life, we have to counterbalance some of those messages. And, the global attention that the Netflix series Adolescence, I imagine many of you watched, really kind of sent an alarm, particularly with parents, because you as parents are grappling with that responsibility of raising boys. Parents are asking themselves, did I just do something wrong? Could I have done something better? It's important to understand how masculinity is defined in the household. Now, this may be something that I know I wasn't, brought up in, or recent generations, but it is something we're going to talk about, how you as a parent can help that son of yours, or if you're working with a young boy, understand what their sense of masculinity is. Because research shows that the most sensitive parent can't fully insulate a young boy from the cultural forces out there. It's tough being a parent with all the other things that you have to do here. And then when you're fighting, so to speak, with these masculine norms, which are social rules and expected behavior associated with men and manhood, given a certain culture. There was a time in our culture in the 18th and 19th century that the biggest thing about being a man was actually encouraged to express their feelings. We see this in books, we see this in journals, we see this in letters. That was a sense of masculinity, and then it changed. And then it changed over the years. So I want to switch gears a little bit. So that's the cultural and some of the social implications. I want to make sure we start here with an interactive sort of developmental sense of adolescence. I want to give you some of those basics here. We certainly know from a biological place where adolescents are, and dopamine is that reward drug, right? It's a hormonal change. It's part of the brain chemistry that happens during adolescence. Dopamine is when we feel rewarded, and most of us know now that when we're going on our screens and we get likes, our brain, it's like ding, we get rewards, right? Like an old-fashioned pinball machine. All the lights, the sounds, the ding, ding, dings, that's going on in our brain. So adolescents are looking for that dopamine fix, and one of the ways they get it is by their peers, by their friends, by their teachers. That sense of reward and need to fit in gets played out here in the biological aspect. If you move over to the right there with the yellow, the cognitive, the prefrontal cortex, this part of the brain is not fully developed yet. It's not fully developed. So any kind of long-term planning, warning to kids, it may not phase them. So when you say, how many times have I told you to clean up the room? Huh? What? Huh? Huh? Oh, they're more in the moment than they are thinking about. Well, why didn't you study for the test? They don't see those long-term outcomes. And that's one of the aspects of growing towards maturity there. From a social point of view here, adolescence, one of the major milestones of an adolescent is to cut ties from their family and start moving towards friendships. Friendships are really important so that peer influence, those social cues are really heightened. And finally, from an emotional and behavioral point of view, again, there are hormonal changes that are going on. So teenagers tend to be, their sensitivity to stress is increased. Very strong emotions, very intense. Sometimes we talk about drama or novellas. Oh, they're having a dramatic fit here, right? And as parents, it just frustrates us. But if you get a sense of what's actually, if you can take a step back and see what's actually happening physically and biologically to the adolescents, it gives you a key into how to approach them, which we'll get to in a moment. These are just typical difficult behaviors. Any adolescent, a typical adolescent, ages 13 to 18, are going to go through. Perhaps you see your child here. Perhaps you see how, some of the conflicts, testing limits, preoccupation with sex. All of these are sort of typical types of behavior. And I wanted to lay that out because I want to compare that to when is there really a cry for help, right? Social withdrawal from usual activities. We know that kids do withdraw, right? They go into their room, they lock their door. But if they're doing that more exclusively, if they're doing that more intensely, if all of a sudden you notice that major change, that could be a cry for help. I'm just going to go through the ones that are highlighted here, but feel free to take a picture. Feel free to look at the others. Significant change in grades, attitude, hygiene, functioning, sleeping. In other words, their daily habits, the way they daily are in the world. And as a parent, you're attuned to that. Sometimes you say, what's wrong? Oh, nothing's wrong. What's wrong? I know something. You pick it up. So when you see these significant changes, you know that there is something that's probably going on, and it may be a nonverbal cry for help. Loss of interest. When you see that your kid is playing games all the time, or sports all the time, or reading comic books, or doing whatever they usually do, and all of a sudden that stops, that loss of interest may be something that you want to take a look at. And of course, when you need help, agencies like New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center are here. And we're going to talk about how to have a conversation with your teen if you feel like they do need therapy or they do need some professional help. But before we go to that, let's take a look at what are boys looking for? What what kind of relationships do they want? Um, Dr. Niobe Way, in her book Rebels with a Cause, say that boys are particularly vulnerable in this crisis of connection. They feel disconnected from their own emotions, and she frames the research here in what she calls boy culture. And what she says, the first step that the boys are looking for is what she called deep secret friendships. And if you think about it, for you males out there, I know I had lots of friends, middle school, elementary school. Boys want friendships where they can share their deep secrets, right? They're more likely to desire during early and middle adolescence because they're vulnerable, because of all the heightened sensitivity I talked about, the biological, cognitive changes. So they want someone that they can talk to about that. Hey, I'm growing pubic hair. Hey, I think I like that person. Hey, my dad is doing someone they can share with. It's different than a sibling because the sibling is still part of the family dynamic. Having a friendship is real important for them. And having these tight friendships promote positive mental health. In other words, they're emotionally intimate with their friendships. And that's good for their mental health. That's good for their well being. As a parent, you want them to have these friends. But her research showed that something changes during late adolescence into young adulthood, that boys struggle to find and to maintain these close male friendships, which she calls the crisis of connection. And one of the biggest factors that she talks about is the fear of looking soft. Before I was talking about that fear of looking weak, that fear of looking soft, that the culture pressures them to act like a man. Again, the masculine norms, not behaving in ways that, pardon me, look girly or gay, right? That this vocabulary of what men shouldn't be is sort of sexualized and genderized. So it's like having emotions is something soft and girl-like, and we know that's not true, right? We want every human being should be able to be in touch with their feelings here, but this crisis of connection comes from the pressures that young boys are experiencing or what they're being told they should act like. So I know I get in sessions, a boy will say, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the movies tomorrow with Scott. No homo." And you're like, "What? What's that?" Or, "Hey, yeah, my friends are staying over tomorrow night. We're gonna have a sleepover party. No homo." So they're adding something that's saying, "Hey, it doesn't mean I'm gay. Doesn't mean I'm." And so get that piece of it to understand that someone who says that has already internalized what they're hearing and what the culture is telling them. So we want to engage with our teenage sons, our teenage youth, our boys in ways that we can approach some of these tough conversations without much judgment. So, as we know, our goal as parents is to raise children who are independent. They can rely on themselves. They have their own voice. And research shows, and as a therapist for 36 years now, when a teen is deeply connected and safely connected to a loving, warm home, they're going to be more self-governing. They're going to take less calculated risks. They're going to build that character that we want them. So what are some tips? First of all, be realistic. This means that not every attempted connection is going to be easy. As a parent, nothing is easy, but every attempt is worth it, right? Your 16-year-old has his own life, friends, school stuff. So it's naturally that they're going to be distracted. And even if you show your gestures and they disavow it, there's another part of them that's getting the message that you care about them. And then at the end of the day, I tell teens all the time, parents just want you to be safe. Parents want you to be, to take care of them, right? So the hardest thing for a parent is to take it not to take it personally. We don't want you to take it personally, right? So something as easy as making a list. Sometimes I have, families do this where you make a short list of for the teen, what is it that you want to do? What is it you'd like to, name 5 things that you'd like to do. And even if it's, climb Mount Everest or something, great. So let's work on some of these things. How can we get there? What would you need to do that? Would you need to save money? Would you need to get in good shape? Would you need to volunteer? So make a list of those kinds of things, big and slow, no matter what your child wants to do. It gives you also a key to their interest, right? And sometimes include their friends. So if it's not like you and your child, but hey, hey, there's a new Jurassic Park movie. You guys want to go? You want to go? Yeah, I want to go. You can have your friends come as well. You know, they may not want to sit with you, in which case, make sure you sit behind them. Say, great, I'll sit behind you so that you can see them and know them, or sit down the row with them. But you're there, or ice skating, or some kind of sports event, right? Do a job together, sometimes making a meal together. Hey, find a recipe. Hey, you like that food. Let's make it together. Let's do some volunteering together. What's going on at your school? How can I volunteer, parent night, or, something that you can do together. And keep your interaction short, right? If you want to start lecturing or telling them about, things that they should know about, try to keep it short, try to keep it simple. Short and simple is going to go a long way. Then you tell me, hey, Scott, my son's not going to speak to me, right? So one of the things we want to do is give them some control. Because if you think about, again, going back to that slide, what's going on internally, biologically, cognitively, socially, they don't have a lot to say. They can't vote, they can't drink, they can't drive. A lot of things that they can't do. So one of the ways that adolescents feel in control is by cutting you out. At least I can do that. Yeah, Ma, talk to the hand. Oh, see you later. Shut the door, shut the bathroom, take a walk, put on the headphones, right? So it gives them that. So you want to leave the door open. I see you're busy right now, but we do need to discuss X, Y, and Z. I'm going to come back later, right? Take a breath. Understand that a teen pulling away is part of their development, right? Cutting those family ties. They start moving away from family and siblings, and then they may have an intimate relationship, teachers, coaches, even therapists, right? They look for other adults in their life. They're starting to move away for them. So they're navigating that transition towards independence. And it is difficult, but many of them won't admit it. So that's why we have to be there. It's like if you remember when your kid was little and you had him on the slide, at some point, you would push them down, and then at some point you'd be all the way back and you'd catch them. And that's what we need to do. We need to give them some distance there, right? So they told you everything, and now all of a sudden, suddenly they shut you out and only share their private thoughts with their friends, right? And you go, hey, buddy. A lot of parents call their kids buddy. That sort of levels the playing field. I would caution you about that. They're not your buddy, they're your son. So call them by their first name, or maybe some other affectionate nickname you have them. Buddy is the person you go to gym class with or have a drink with. That's your buddy. But again, if you go in there and you want to ask them some questions, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Again, understand that that's maybe a sense of control. Try not to lecture them, so you can try to have more positive interactions. Again, in engaging in things that they like, maybe you don't like, but hey, teach me how to do this, or I'll teach you how to do that, something they may be interested. A lot of times parents do this. When are you coming home? What's going on? Where are you? What are you doing? Pumping that information constantly just turns them off, and they're more than likely going to do the same to you. So you want to Talk to them like an adult, respect them, and in turn, they'll start to value your opinions. So now you're telling me your son still won't speak to you, right? They give you the eye roll and the one-word response. Again, this falls into the normal range of teenage development. They're going to be focused on their peers. That said, it's still your job to insist on respect. So you want to set appropriate limits, but focus on strengthening your relationship as well. You can do two things at the same time. Resist the urge to lecture them. I know it's tough. That's why having a partner or another parent, or if you're working in an agency, somebody else coming around, is good. It's kind of like a tag team there. Remember, again, that teenagers are emotional. Look for the distress under the disrespect and remind them of who they really are. In other words, hey, I know you're really upset now, but normally you're not like this. So I imagine there's something going on. Remind them, because again, they're not thinking about long term. Remind them, hey, you're pissed off right now. I don't like you being pissed off at me. I wonder if there's something going on. Try to get to what's underneath. Hard not to take this personally, right? Hard not to take it personally, but you can really create the beginning of a conversation with them. And now you say, hey, Scott, he's never going to speak to me. Kids in this room, I love this picture because that's a lot of adolescence here, right? If your child is really starting to withdraw from things that gave them pleasure, growing more isolated, that could be a crisis. It could be a serious concern that something's happening, right? So if your child seems hostile and angry, give them a chance to explain if they think you did something wrong. Hey, was it me? Did I do something wrong here? Right? Because you're engaging in their emotions, you're engaging in their thinking without taking it personally. Hey, if I did something wrong, let me know what it is. And then I can tell you what I meant by that. Because you're also then modeling to them what might be going on, right? Certainly, no teenager's room should be off limits to a parent. I knew one parent who actually took the door off the room. Not a great idea. Literally took the door off the room. Not a great idea because that parent was so full of emotions that I needed to work with them to engage with them so they could engage what's going on between the two of you. What's happening there, right? Especially if they're spending hours alone, right? It's not all uncommon for teens to answer questions like, where are you going? They say out. When will you be back? They say later. You have a right to know. And you want to make sure that you stand firm and you stand there. Sometimes parents go, oh, okay, it's all right. You want to stand firm. You're modeling to them. I know it's tough. I know it's really hard. But you have to find it within yourself to just stand grounded there, right? And again, in cases where your son refused to communicate, it may be advisable to monitor social media. There are lots of different ways about it. We've done lots of presentations on that. We'll give you the website where you can go and watch some of those as well here. And of course, you may need particular help here, right? And your son says, I don't need therapy, right? They don't think they need help. It's just how I am. They don't think therapy or medicine will work. They're already tried it, didn't like it. They think getting help is embarrassing. Again, this goes back to that shame. It makes me look weak. My friends, I don't want to tell my friends. I don't want to tell my family, right? That defense that they bring up there. But it's essential that parents give them a chance to explain how they feel, not only to improve your relationship, but give them some space. Okay, if you need to jot it down, jot it down. Nobody says you have to know all of this, right? So how do you help a hesitant teen into therapy, right? You want to frame it differently. I can't imagine whatever they like. If they like sports and say basketball plays, they need coaches, right? They need to practice. They need to practice their jump shot, their turnaround shot, their pivot. They need to their long game. That's why they have a coach. So in therapy is something you can frame differently, like, Don't you want to improve your homework? You want to improve your science? In therapy, you're going to learn new skills, right? Choose a vocabulary. You're dealing with a lot of stress. Everybody deals with stress. That's what you're going to talk about in therapy. So frame it not like, oh, you're going to be there for 100 years. You're going to be laying on the couch. They're going to now really understand that your son can learn skills in therapy and practice that, right? Focus on their priority. What is it that they're dealing with right now? Well, I don't like school. Okay, well, that's something that you can talk to in school. That's something that you can talk about how you can improve there, right? So that your son can start to identify what their discomfort is and how they can use that. Of course, you want to find the right therapist, and you have to be keen. Sometimes teens will go in and meet a therapist, and I don't like it. I don't like the office. I don't like this or that. One of the things about having your child see someone professionally, it's important to get the right folks. I know here at New York Psychotherapy and Counseling Center, over 40% of our clients are teens and children, so we have that expertise. And we also work with families and will see the parent as well to make sure that we understand what's going on at home. And sometimes the parent often finds therapy useful for themselves, right? We know a lot of adults who realize, oh, I'm acting just like my mom or my dad. I don't want to do that. And sometimes short-term therapy is all they need, which is often something we tell to teens too. We don't want you to be here for years. We can help you with some short-term interventions that they want. One of the guidelines for developing conversations, as I said in the beginning here, and we're going to be wrapping this up shortly, is how does your child define masculinity? What does it mean to be a man? And maybe you haven't had that conversation with him yet. Maybe they're 12, 13, 14, but certainly at some point you'll listen for it and hear that opening to have that conversation. Get a sense of what and see if it gels with yours. If it's too high, see if you can kind of bring it down. If it's too low, see if you can kind of build it up. Again, most parents want their kids to be safe, to have a good life, to be decent human beings. And in order to do that, we want to find out their sense about it. Identity formation is the paramount developmental milestone of any adolescent. So initiate those discussions about social supports, after school programs, sports, theater, whatever it is they like. Take a curious stance in their social life. They'll tell you when you're getting too close. Oh, how's that? Oh, and how's that person? And how you doing there? Great. Fine. Great. And then they put their headphones on. Okay. You took some action and showed that you were interested in it. As I've mentioned, I hope one of the things you take away today is that interpersonal relationships for young boys is really important. And sometimes they can meet other boys. Again, they're playing sports, they're in a play, they're taking hikes, they're doing some community work, they're in some club at school. We want them to, get the message that it's important to have these kinds of important relationships. And of course, the final thing here is stigma. Be attentive to the shame. If they failed in school, but they tried. If they didn't get the school play, but they tried, or sports and they didn't get the trophy. Right? We can't have everyone be a winner. That's not how life works. So underneath, when in doubt, think, I wonder if my son is feeling shame. He didn't measure up. So that's why it goes back to that first question. What does it mean to be a man? What do you think it means to be a man? Might be some cliches. You want to, oh, really? How does that mean that you don't talk about your feelings? Wow, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Be curious, right? These are three of the books where in terms of the cultural implication, Ruth Whitman's Boy Mom, Niobe Ways, Rebels with a Cause, and Richard Reeves of Boys and Men. They're all, I think, now in paperback or and anywhere. If you want more information about their research, their findings, and also what other things that you might be able to do. Finally, before I hand it back, just want to remind everybody, no matter what you do, keep connecting with your teen. They will tell you when you're coming in too hot, right? And remember, by simply being present, being caring, staying interested, and above all, just be curious. I have parents tell me all the time, I don't know if, he wakes up one morning and he's the greatest guy in the world, and the next morning he wakes up and he's Godzilla. That's teens. That's teens. So take it as a win when they talk to you. Take it as a win when they're opening up. Take it as a win. Give yourselves that permission. It's real important here. You may have to play some video games. You may have to watch movies you don't want to watch, but they see that you're making some efforts, right? So I know that was a lot here, but I want to thank you so much. It's the email, and that's a place where to give help. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to send it over to Alyssa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Scott. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. One moment. Okay, so once again, thank you so much, Scott, for such an insightful and engaging presentation. Before we close out, I just wanted to share a few quick highlights about NYPCC for anyone who is not familiar with our services. We offer both in-person and virtual appointments, and we serve children starting at ages 3 up into the age 100, so everybody could get their services with us. We're open 7 days a week with extended hours, and we do not have a wait list currently. And we accept all insurances affiliated with Medicaid, Medicaid managed care, essential plans, and Child Health Plus. Our goal at the end of the day is to make sure that every person and family in our community can access the mental health support that they deserve. So if you or someone you know could benefit from our services, you can scan the QR code on your screen or visit www.nypcc.org/referral to make a referral or schedule an appointment. We're also listing this into the chat, so if you are interested, you can go ahead and feel free to click on that link.
Yeah, we can open the chat.
Alrighty. And then also, if you all enjoyed today's presentation, we would love it if you could take a moment to leave us a Google review. Your feedback really helps us continue offering these community workshops, and you can also scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the bio to share your thoughts. And before we close, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who joined us today and to Scott for such a thoughtful presentation. To learn more about our programs and upcoming events, visit www.nypcc.org or call us at 718-908-8000. And of course, be sure to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok, all at NYPCC to stay connected with our community. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to share with your community once it's uploaded. Thank you all again for spending your afternoon with us. Take care and be well.